first shot shattered the silence. By the time the last one rang out, 3 people were dead. A 4-year-old girl was missing. And the man responsible? He was supposed to love them. February 16, 2025, Tamarack, Florida. A morning that would leave an entire neighborhood in shock, a family in ruin, and a child without a mother. It started inside, then came alive outside. Gunfire in the street, the sound of someone running for their life. Neighbors peered through their windows, too afraid to step outside. By the time police arrived, it was too late. 3 lives lost, a father, a daughter, and a neighbor, all executed with precision as if this was a plan, not a crime of passion. The shooter knew exactly what they were doing. And when it was over, they didn't flee in panic. They left with something, or rather, someone. What led to this horrifying moment? How did it come to this? To find the answers, we have to go back to where it all began. Back to the man who made it happen. Tamarack, Florida. A quiet suburban city just outside of Fort Lauderdale. The kind of place where neighbors wave at each other, kids ride their bikes down the sidewalk, and violent crime is almost unheard of. But on the morning of February 16, 2025, that illusion of safety was shattered. When police arrived at the scene, the carnage spoke for itself. 3 people dead, a mother, a grandfather, a neighbor. A 4-year-old girl gone, taken. And the man responsible? He had vanished, leaving behind a crime scene so brutal that even veteran officers were shaken. At the heart of it all was Mary Gingles, a 34-year-old mother doing everything she could to protect her daughter. Those who knew Mary described her as kind, resilient, and fiercely devoted to Seraphine. She had a close-knit relationship with her father, David Ponzer, who was not just her dad but her biggest supporter. And then there was Andrew Ferrin, their neighbor, just an innocent bystander in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, how did an ordinary early morning turn into a bloodbath? What happened in those terrifying moments before the gunfire started? The story, as it would turn out, was far more twisted than anyone could have imagined. This wasn't random. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong or a senseless act of violence. This was personal. This was planned. And it all led back to one man, someone who had once been part of Mary's life, someone she had tried to escape, but in the end, she couldn't. As investigators unraveled the case, they would discover a chilling pattern of control, obsession, and violence. And the truth? The truth would be even more horrifying than the crime itself. Before they became victims, they were people. People with dreams, with struggles, with lives that meant something. To truly understand the horror of what happened on February 16, 2025, we have to step back. Before the gunfire, before the panic, before everything changed forever, we have to know who Mary, David, and Andrew really were. Mary Gingles was more than just another name in a tragic headline. She was a daughter, a friend, but most importantly, a mother. At 34 years old, she had built her world around her 4-year-old daughter, Seraphine. If you asked anyone who knew her, they would tell you the same thing. Mary lived for her child. She had always been described as kind-hearted and determined, the type of person who saw the good in people even when they didn't deserve it. But behind her warm smile was a woman who had been fighting a quiet battle, one she had kept hidden for far too long. She had been in a relationship that wasn't just toxic but dangerous, a relationship that had left her scared, isolated, and constantly looking over her shoulder. But she was trying to break free. In the months leading up to her death, Mary had been rebuilding. She had a job, she had a support system, and most importantly, she had hope. She wanted more than anything to give Seraphine a stable, loving home. She had taken legal steps to ensure her daughter's safety, to keep a certain someone out of their lives. But it wasn't enough, because when an abuser loses control, that's often when they're at their most dangerous. If Mary was Seraphine's protector, then David Ponzer was hers. At 64 years old, David had seen life's ups and downs, but nothing mattered to him more than his daughter and granddaughter. He had been Mary's rock, the one person she could always turn to, and he took that role seriously. He wasn't just a father, he was a fighter. He had been the one to encourage Mary to take the steps to free herself. He had been there through every court battle, every difficult decision, and every fearful night. Friends and family described David as someone who had spent his entire life looking out for others. Whether it was his daughter, his granddaughter, or a total stranger, David was always the first to step in, to offer help, to make things right. And on the night of February 16, That's exactly what he tried to do. He was there for Mary. He was there for Seraphine, but he never got the chance to save them. And then there was Andrew Ferrin, a name that should have never been part of this story. At 36 years old, Andrew was just a neighbor, just someone who had been in the wrong place at the worst possible time. He wasn't involved in Mary's struggles. He didn't know the danger she was facing. He had simply been there. Andrew was described by those who knew him as an easygoing, helpful guy. He had moved into the neighborhood a few years prior, always keeping to himself but never hesitating to lend a hand. On the night of the murders, Andrew had opened his doors to help Mary as security footage showed her running frantically around. That was his biggest undoing. February 16th started like any other night. There were no immediate signs that something horrific was about to unfold. Mary was home, David was with her, Seraphine was safe in the house, but outside, in the darkness, danger was already waiting. At some point, the killer arrived. He didn't knock, he didn't hesitate. He was there for one reason, to destroy the life Mary had built. Inside, David was the first victim. He was found dead in his backyard with his coffee mug shattered next to him. And then, in the final, chilling moment of the night, the killer walked inside. Shots rang out in the street. Mary ran, but she didn't make it far. She was seen in a security camera footage from their neighbor's house running around looking for help, with the killer walking calmly behind her and their daughter Seraphine running after him. She was gunned down inside Andrew's home. Andrew, who had heard the commotion and had opened his door to help shield her, he too was executed inside his home. After the killings, the killer calmly took Seraphine away. A mother, a father, a neighbor, gone, a child, taken, and the man who did it, he was just getting started. The first 911 call came in at 6:43 a.m. A neighbor, too terrified to step outside, reported hearing gunshots. Then another call, and another. By the time Broward County deputies arrived, the street was eerily quiet. Inside the house, the horror unfolded. Officers entered cautiously, unsure if the shooter was still inside, combing through the crime scene for answers. The first officers on the scene described what they found as nothing short of execution. They first saw David at the patio, dead from a gunshot wound to the head, blood pooling around him, with Mary and Seraphine missing. It was clear that whoever had done this wasn't just trying to kill, he was making a statement. Detectives arrived within the hour and conducted a more thorough search through the crime scene. They later discovered the body of Mary and Andrew at Andrew's house. Andrew's uncle was sleeping upstairs at the time and somehow never heard the gunshots. The bullets recovered from the scene were fired from a 9mm handgun. The shooter hadn't been sloppy. Each shot was precise, deliberate. He knew exactly where to aim, ensuring his victims wouldn't survive. There were no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds, which meant one thing: the victims never had a chance. But then something even more disturbing emerged. Seraphine was missing. At first, officers thought she might be hiding somewhere in the house, traumatized by what she had seen, but a quick search revealed what they feared the most. She was gone, and so was the man responsible. Immediately, law enforcement shifted their focus. This was no longer just a homicide investigation, it was a kidnapping. The first 24 hours after an abduction are the most critical, and the clock was already ticking. As investigators worked the scene, they turned to the neighbors, the people who had heard the gunshots, the ones who had made the desperate 911 calls. But fear kept most of them from saying much. This wasn't a crime they wanted to be involved in. I heard screaming, then gunshots, maybe 4 or 5, one after the other. I didn't see who did it, I just stayed inside, the first witness said. Another witness reported seeing a figure moving quickly through the street, but in the darkness they couldn't make out details. It wasn't until law enforcement pulled surveillance footage from nearby homes that they got their first real clue. There, in the grainy footage, was a man dressed in dark clothing moving with purpose. He wasn't frantic, he wasn't in a hurry, he was calm, collected, almost like he knew exactly what he was doing. The timestamp on the footage? Just minutes before police arrived. By now, police had a working theory. This wasn't some random act of violence, it was premeditated. And the missing child? She wasn't just taken, she was targeted. Officers scoured the house, looking for anything that could point to a suspect. And that's when they found it. The restraining order. filed by Mary Gingles against her estranged husband, a man she had been terrified of, a man she had fought to keep out of her life, a man who was now missing, along with their daughter. And just like that, the manhunt began. But what authorities didn't know yet was that this case was about to take an even darker turn, because finding Seraphine was only part of the nightmare. The real question was, what would her father do next? By this point, detectives had started developing a theory about who the shooter was, her estranged husband, Nathan Gingles. If you're captivated by true crime stories and want to stay updated on the darkest cases, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We release in-depth crime documentaries just like this one, uncovering the chilling details behind real-life mysteries. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button now. He wasn't just some stranger. He wasn't a random threat lurking in the dark. He was the one person Mary Gingles had been trying to escape, and now he had done the unthinkable. To the outside world, 43 years old, Nathan Gingles seemed like an ordinary man, a father, a husband, someone who blended into everyday life without drawing much attention. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. Nathan wasn't just controlling, he was dangerous. Born in Florida, Nathan had a seemingly average upbringing. He held steady jobs, maintained a social presence, and at one point, he appeared to be a loving husband and father. But those who knew him best saw the cracks early on. He was possessive, easily angered, and when things didn't go his way, he lashed out. Mary and Nathan's relationship had started like many others, full of love, passion, and promises of a happy life. But as time passed, those promises turned into ultimatums. That passion became control, and the love, it became fear. Mary had endured years of emotional and psychological abuse before she finally made the decision to leave. And when she did, Nathan didn't take it lightly. He stalked her. He harassed her. He threatened her. She had gone to the courts for protection, filing for a restraining order, trying to keep Seraphine safe. But with men like Nathan, a piece of paper is nothing more than an inconvenience. He believed Seraphine belonged to him, that Mary had no right to take her away, that he was in control. And on February 16, 2025, he proved just how far he was willing to go to take back what he thought was his. Looking back, the warning signs were all there. Mary had confided in close friends that she was scared, that she felt like she was being watched, that no matter what she did, she couldn't shake the feeling that Nathan was never really gone. But domestic violence cases are complicated, restraining orders can only do so much, and the system, the very system that was supposed to protect her, failed. Nathan had been ordered to stay away from Mary and Seraphine, but what good is a court order when the person it's meant for doesn't care? When someone is willing to kill to get what they want, no legal document is going to stop them. The truth was chilling. Nathan wasn't acting out of rage. He wasn't blinded by emotion. He planned this. He waited, and when the moment was right, he struck. Now he was on the run, with his daughter in tow, and for law enforcement, the question wasn't just how to find him, it was how much time they had left before he killed again. Later the same day, February 16, 2025, following a statewide Amber Alert, authorities located Nathan Gingles and his 4-year-old daughter, Seraphine, in the parking lot of a Walmart in North Lauderdale. Seraphine was found unharmed, while Nathan was taken into custody without incident. Upon his arrest, Nathan faced multiple charges, including 3 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, child abuse, child neglect, burglary, and interference with custody. These charges stem from the fatal shootings of his estranged wife, Mary Gingles, her father David Ponzer, and their neighbor Andrew Ferrin. In the days following his arrest, Nathan appeared before a Broward County judge via video link from the county jail. During this initial hearing, the judge detailed the charges against him and denied bail, citing the severity of the alleged crimes and the potential flight risk. Public defenders have been appointed to represent Nathan, as he did not retain private counsel. The defense has yet to issue a formal statement regarding the charges. The community of Tamarack has been left reeling in the wake of these tragic events. Vigils have been held to honor the victims, with neighbors and friends expressing their grief and shock. Media coverage has been extensive, focusing not only on the crime itself, but also on the systemic failures that may have contributed to this tragedy. Reports have highlighted that 7 deputies have been placed on administrative leave for allegedly mishandling prior domestic violence calls involving Nathan and Mary. As the legal proceedings continue, the public remains vigilant, seeking justice for Mary, David, and Andrew, and ensuring that Seraphine receives the support and care she needs in the aftermath of such profound loss. In the wake of the tragic events that claimed the lives of Mary Gingles, her father David Ponzer, and neighbor Andrew Ferrin, the Broward County Sheriff's Office faced intense scrutiny. At the forefront was Sheriff Gregory Toney, addressing the public with a candid acknowledgement of the department's failures. "We fell short on this one. Basically, we had a chance to save your loved one's life, and we failed," Sheriff Gregory Toney said. Sheriff Toney's admission was a stark reflection of the internal investigation's findings, revealing critical missteps in handling Mary Gingles' prior pleas for help. In response to these revelations, Sheriff Toney took decisive action, placing 7 deputies on administrative leave. The suspended personnel include 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and 4 deputies. This decision underscores the severity of the department's shortcomings in addressing the escalating domestic violence reports leading up to the tragedy. The internal review uncovered a series of alarming oversights. In October 2024, Mary Gingles discovered a tracking device on her vehicle allegedly placed by her estranged husband, Nathan Gingles. She reached out to Deputy Brian, who failed to respond to her calls and follow-up email. This lack of action left Mary vulnerable and without the protective intervention she desperately sought. Further compounding these failures, in December 2024, Mary reported that Nathan had threatened to kill her and had begun buying silencers for his guns. Despite a deputy spending over 30 minutes gathering her statement, no arrest was made. Sheriff Toney emphasized the gravity of this lapse. "There was enough there where we could have potentially pursued a probable cause affidavit so we can arrest him and take him off the street, and that didn't happen," Sheriff Gregory Toney said. "I don't want the public to lose faith. When we rectify this situation, I'm going to send the fear of God amongst this entire agency." This pledge reflects a broader initiative to overhaul departmental protocols and ensure that such grievous oversights do not recur. Sheriff Toney continued, "In the quiet streets of Tamarack, Florida, the echoes of a tragic morning continue to resonate. The loss of Mary Gingles, her father David Ponzer, and neighbor Andrew Ferrin has left an indelible mark on their families, the community, and beyond. The Gingles and Ponzer families are enveloped in profound grief. Friends and relatives describe Mary as a devoted mother who faced unimaginable challenges. Her father David was known as a pillar of strength and support. The Ferrin family mourns the loss of Andrew, a man remembered for his kindness and willingness to help others. His uncle, George David Jr., shared his sorrow. I honestly believe that Andrew was the best part of all of us. He didn't come from a traditional marriage. We all raised him." In the wake of this tragedy, George emphasizes the importance of honoring Andrew's legacy by advocating for legislative changes to prevent similar events in the future. Despite the terror of that morning, the community's response has been one of unity and support. Nathan Gingles, the estranged husband of Mary, faces multiple charges, including 3 counts of first-degree murder. He remains in custody as the legal process unfolds. As of now, Nathan has not made any public statements regarding the allegations. The community and the nation watch closely, seeking justice for the lives so brutally taken. As the community mourns, several pressing questions remain unanswered. Could more decisive action by law enforcement have prevented this tragedy? Were there systemic failures in addressing the signs of escalating domestic violence? These concerns have ignited discussions about the necessity for comprehensive reforms in how such cases are handled. Advocates are calling for enhanced training for officers, improved protocols for responding to domestic violence incidents, and legislative changes to protect those at risk. The hope is that through these efforts, future tragedies can be averted, and the memories of Mary, David, and Andrew will serve as catalysts for meaningful change. 3 lives lost, a community shaken, a system exposed. The murders of Mary Gingles, David Ponzer, and Andrew Ferrin were more than just a tragedy. They were a failure of protection, a failure of intervention, and a failure of justice long before the first shot was ever fired. Mary fought to escape her past. She did everything she could. She filed for protection, she reported threats, she sought help, And yet, in the end, she was left vulnerable, ignored by a system that should have been there for her. She wasn't just killed by a man she feared, she was failed by the very institutions meant to protect her. Following Sheriff Gregory Tony's admission and placing the 7 deputies on leave, many still wonder if this will be enough. Will these suspensions lead to real change, or will this just be another case that fades into the background? How many more Marys have to die before the system truly takes domestic violence seriously? And what about Nathan Gingles? As he sits in a Broward County jail awaiting trial, there is one question that still looms over this case. Why? We know the history, we know the abuse, we know the fear he instilled in Mary, but what was the final trigger? What went through his mind in the moments before he pulled that trigger, before he took their daughter and ran? This case is a brutal reminder that domestic violence is more than just a personal matter, it's a public crisis. 1 in 4 women will experience severe domestic violence in their lifetime. Over half of all female homicide victims are killed by an intimate partner. And in too many cases, like Mary's, the warning signs are there, but they're ignored. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please don't wait for the worst to happen. There is help. There are resources, and there are people who will listen, even when it feels like no one is. Mary Gingles wanted to live. She wanted to raise her daughter. She wanted to be free from fear. But she never got that chance. The only thing we can do now is make sure her story is not forgotten, that we demand better, that we fight for those still trapped in the cycle of abuse, and that we remember justice isn't just about what happens in a courtroom. It's about making sure this never happens again. And if you're fascinated by true crime, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon to never miss an upload. We have more gripping stories coming soon, shedding light on cases that deserve to be told. Stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one.